Hey there, gamers. Not a review or anything for this video. Instead, this is just something I just want to get off my chest. It's maybe a little bit of you could say, a rant, maybe a little bit of venting, but it's just something that kind of annoys me. So, throughout history, we've had all kinds of game genres. We've had fighting games, platformers, 2D, 3D, you know, the new 3D. But anyway, back in I think probably the 90s, but even before that, I think it was in the 80s too. If you go to an arcade, you could play a light gun shooter. Something like Mad Dog McCree. Mad Dog McCree was around during the 90s. That was more like a shooting gallery, but it's a light gun shooter. I think one of the most well-known series of light gun shooters is the House of the Dead series. People have loved those games. And because of that, well, the Wii, especially with its the Wiimote with the pointer and everything, it allows not just for ports like the arcade games like those or Ghost Squad, but it allows for ports of games like Target Terror. But it also allows for games like House of the Dead Overkill or Attack of the Movies 3D. But the weird thing is the past generation. Let me move these over. Past generations, before the 360, the Wii, and the PS3, the light gun shooter was kind of considered acceptable. It was like no one really complained about it. No one had any problems with it really. And really, it's not until this generation that these games were considered to be lesser titles. They were considered to be the lazy development cycle. That these are people just not trying their hardest. Why, out of all these years of the light gun shooter being, a light gun shooter, you could say a rail shooter, but really, something like Sin and Punishment 2, it's a rail shooter, yeah, but that kind of goes more along a little differently. That's kind of more like, in a sense, a shoot 'em up. So I'm going to consider that not part of it. Instead, I'm going to consider it more as like the light gun shooters, the games that usually require in the arcades a gun, or it's first person view and you're doing something. But really, this wasn't considered the lazy developers, game, or it wasn't considered a lesser title. Actually, it wasn't considered like that until these games came out. Resident Evil: The Umbrella Chronicles and Dead Space Extraction. Pretty much these two games single-handedly made the light gun genre hated by a lot of gamers. I don't mean just casual gamers or, you can say hardcore. I don't like that term, but, traditional gamers. Apparently now all of a sudden felt this genre was the lazy man's version of these genres. The first person shooter. Which is just total BS in my opinion. I mean, something like Samurai Warriors Katana was an early Wii title, and that transformed, a beat 'em up in a sense, into a first-person rail shooter. I mean, yeah, it definitely just changed up a couple of things, and that it's not really shooting; it's more sword swinging, with a couple of missions where you have to fire arrows. But no one really, people went, oh, okay, whatever. But no one really complained. No one was paranoid that Samurai Warriors or Dynasty Warriors is going to become something like this forever. But no, the minute Resident Evil and Dead Space decided to try something different and go into the light gun genre, all of a sudden people started getting paranoid. They were saying, "Oh, we're never going to see a traditional action title again. These developers are just going to keep doing this lazy development. Oh man, what's with these light gun shooters? Why do people have to take the lazy way out of development? Why can't they let us control our character?" What? It's like they're trying to say this kind of argument was around for a while. This never was a problem. No one ever complained about not being able to move in House of the Dead. No one ever complained about not being able to move in Ghost Squad, in Time Crisis, in Virtua Cop. These two, they're not bad games. I enjoy both of them. They're both very nice, good games. At the same time, they both terribly changed the style a light gun shooter should be done with. Pretty much for all of these, either you have to have lots of fast-paced action like House of the Dead, Ghost Squad, even Target Terror, or in the case like Mad Dog McCree, it's like a It's like a sharpshooter thing where you have to have fast reflexes. You have to know when to move, when to react. Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles and Dead Space slow down the process. They slow down the gameplay, yeah, but it doesn't make them bad. It just makes them different. But these two games pretty much, Resident, and of course Umbrella Chronicles did well enough to get another game, Darkside Chronicles. And that pretty much made people go, oh man, why can't they do more games like Resident Evil 4? Though people can argue that Resident Evil 4 kind of took the series away from its traditional style, and then people argue that 5 is kind of not really a Resident Evil title so much anymore. It's not about the survival horror anymore. But I mean, really, it's like with this kind of argument, it's like saying that Sin and Punishment 2, because it's a third-person rail shooter, you can't, you can control your character, but it's still on a fixed, path. You can't choose where you want to go exactly. It's like saying that this game is a lesser title than Rogue Trooper. It isn't. They're just different. I don't know, it's like, just because Call of Duty, or Halo, or Half-Life, what's the of any first-person shooter, or Marines, that, you can move your character around, and because of that, they're more of a real game. No! They don't become any more of a real game, than any of these old-school light gun shooters. And like I said, the light gun shooter came from the arcades. Where, it's about quick gameplay, it's about fast action, it's about not having to worry about doing stuff. You can't really see a first-person shooter in arcades that often. I mean, yeah, I believe Half-Life was adapted into arcades in Japan. I believe even Quake was, but those were generally done as death matches, fast-paced action. I mean, really, people, like these, I hate to reiterate, but these two games seem to have single-handedly made the light gun genre kind of hated. To the point where even the critics are kind of like complain about it every once in a while. And of course, Visceral Games, they try saying, oh, Dead Space Extraction is not a light gun shooter, it's a quote-unquote guided first-person experience. I think that's really where people started going, well, that's a light gun shooter. Because really, in a sense, a lot of people have to go with the comparison. They always have to say, oh, this is like, Dead Space is kind of like trying to be like House of the Dead. No! Was Dead Space a survival horror 3D action, survival game turning into a light gun shooter? They're dumbing down the gameplay, they're making it simplified, they're making it sucky. No. Just shut up with that. Or it's like Resident Evil. It's like, oh no, it's about survival horror, not about killing everything that moves. Yes, then why do people seem to always love Resident Evil 4 and 5? I mean, I like Resident Evil 4, but it is a very different title than Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3. Or Code Veronica. It's very different. So just consider Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles and Resident Evil Darkside Chronicles as being different. Just because House of the Dead Overkill, you can't control your character, doesn't mean it's any less of a title than Call of Duty. That's complete and utter bull. I mean, I'm amazed people aren't complaining about the upcoming Gunblade New York / LA Machine Guns Arcade Hits Pack that Sega's doing. Those are two mid-90s light gun shooters that are being released on the Wii. I'm surprised no one's saying, what the hell, Sega, why do you keep why are you re-releasing these games? Why are you releasing light gun shooters? Well, first off, those two games never got a console release before. And second off, the Wii is the best way to do it. And you know what? It's going to come to the point now, we got the PlayStation Move coming, and that's already confirmed to be getting like a version of Time Crisis 4 that has not only Time Crisis 4, but a couple other, like 2 other games with it that are like gun shooters. Or all of a sudden we're going to get paranoid now that they're going to make more light gun shooters on the PS3, aside from just the one that uses the GunCon 3. Are we, and with Kinect, are we going to start worrying about that too? Or are we going to be worrying that like Halo's going to become a guided first-person shooter? People just want to be paranoid for no real reason, it seems. want to let this, I kind of get annoyed when people bring that up. People bring up that these automatically suck because they're like these games. And that because of that, these games are lesser than these games. Or, not as much of a game. They're not as good. They're not as important. They're not as special just because you can't move the character. Really, I'd like to see a developer just make a game where you control a character and you don't do anything else. That would be kind of interesting. Hey, you got your character, you can control him, be happy. So, that was just something I wanted to get out.